Seeing this face again on this YouTube channel for some of you probably is bad news. For others of you, it may very well be good news. Well, I guess one of the good pieces of me being back and doing videos again is that it means that I can do some Q&As. I can take some questions from you from Twitter and answer them here for all of the world to hear and see. Isn't that exciting? So that's exactly what we did. I broke the Q&A this weekend into two parts, or this week I should say, into two parts. This one here will be dedicated to the sports, and with all that's going on in the world, certainly wanted people to feel okay with asking me questions about other real world and political topics in a separate Q&A thread. So that video will be up soon after this one. But since this is, first and foremost, a sports-based channel, let's talk about some sports and let's answer some questions from some of you. And thank you guys for taking to Twitter to ask your questions. I will go ahead and get started. At K_Nokaj asks, I love basketball, but I can't watch the NBA. There is no defense and offenses are running wild with threes. Do you feel the same way? I will say first and foremost, I am not a fan of the new style of basketball that has permeated the league. I'm not a huge fan. It just isn't very appealing to me. And that is not just to say that the 80s and 90s were just the greatest and fantastic and awesome, but at least what the 80s and 90s had was some balance. Like you had guys that could shoot threes, but you also had guys that could break you down off the dribble, but you also had guys that could play in the post. You actually had legit big men, legit power forwards, legit centers that did legit more traditional pivot man type of things. And you don't get that now. Like 7'2" guys are out there at the top of the key. 7'2" guys are out wide. Like, yeah, it's just not for me. There's a lack of physicality. Even more than in the 80s and 90s, guys are able to get away with even more on the offensive side of the ball. Like you talk about the Euro step and some of this other step back crap, and it's just like, why do we even bother having traveling rules? Why do we even bother at making guys dribble anymore? Why not just let them catch the ball and run with it? What the hell's the difference at this point? I will say, admittedly, I think a significant reason is that I just can't get as emotionally invested in the NBA today is also because the Bulls are a joke. Like, that certainly doesn't help matters. And even when you talk about the comeback to bubble ball, or so to speak, like the Bulls aren't even involved at all. So, like, there's a piece of it already that I'm already removed from it. But yes, I would agree. Like, I don't enjoy the new style of the NBA, and it's not going anywhere. I wish it would, or I wish it would tone down just a little bit. But a lot of times it just feels like watching All-Star games, and I don't want to see that all the time. Some of the younger fans will sit there and appreciate it and enjoy it, and good for them. But yeah, it's not really for me, honestly. Vinny, good old Vinny, ask a question. Do you think the NFL season will have the full 16 games, or do you think it will be reduced? That is an excellent question, Vinny. And I think that's a question a lot of us probably are thinking about right now. Especially there's some buzz, at least at the time of this recording, on whether or not there's even going to be fall college football. Like, how is the NFL going to be able to pull this off with teams having to travel to different cities? There's no bubble. You're talking about seasons spread out over several months. Like, there are certainly inherent challenges here. Now, I would say I would expect the NFL to certainly be able to afford the infrastructure such as regular daily testing and so forth and isolation, some of those different things that might allow it to work for some period of time. But you look at what happened with Major League Baseball and you see a COVID outbreak on the Miami Marlins. You see a COVID outbreak on the St. Louis Cardinals, and who knows what team is going to be next. And that's baseball, where naturally the game has a lot more social distance involved. Where you're talking about the National Football League, you're talking about football, a violent collision contact sport where guys touch on every single play. So you're exchanging bodily contact and bodily fluids. Like, it just feels like a recipe for disaster. I certainly am hopeful that there will be a full 16-game season, but I really worry about is what happens if you do have one or two teams that have an outbreak and all of a sudden you've got to push games off, you got to potentially postpone games, suspend games. Like, I don't know at this point, Vinny. I think it's a great question. I think it's one of the great unanswered questions that we just don't know much about yet. It sounds like for the moment, at least, they're going to try and plow ahead with the regular season as planned, but I am very pessimistic about the ability to pull this off. I really, really am. And I wouldn't be surprised at some point in time if something happens or games are reduced or something along those lines. Great question. At California EST 96, why do you think MLB and Manfred haven't punished the Houston Asterix and even protected them? Why have none of their players gotten suspended, but Joe Kelly has? Because Rob Manfred is a tool. And I think I just did a video on this channel, as a matter of fact, that you can go check out, talking about Rob Manfred and questioning why he still continues to serve as Major League Baseball's commissioner. Yeah, that's crap. They defrauded and cheated the game to not just a thing of just stealing signs. Like, this was a whole nother level. This was an infrastructure thing. This was embedded into their culture for years. And the players were involved. They were complicit. They knew. And they have had no consequences at all. At all. That's insane. And it's crap. And unfortunately, exactly what I would expect out of a league that's being run by Rob Manfred. Kickfoot Fist 420 asks, who wins the starting job in New England, Cam Newton or Jarrett Stidham? You know, perhaps if you're believing that they are trying to tank this year, then maybe you say Jarrett Stidham. If you think they're going to go with the veteran and try to win what they can, then maybe it's Cam Newton. I think it's a very interesting fit with McDaniel's system and under Belichick, how Cam Newton would work there. Based off of name and based off of pedigree, I certainly would give Cam the advantage. But they may roll with Stidham. You know, what do they got to lose at this point? And the same question, but with Foles and Trubisky. God, that is the $64,000 question, isn't it? Isn't it? I don't know. I haven't really thought about it much. But who wins the starting job? I think that's a tough question because I've already seen some things talking about how they worry about whether Foles is going to be fully ready to take over by week 1. Well, it wasn't part of the reason he made the stupid trade for him to begin with, because he knew the playbook, so there wasn't going to be this period of adjustment. Like, if you made the trade for Foles, you made the trade for Foles because you knew Trubisky wasn't the guy. Right decision to acknowledge that Trubisky's not the guy. Wrong move to go trade a mid-round pick for Nick Foles. That was stupid. But based off of what they have invested in Nick Foles, I would be stunned if he's not the starting quarterback in week 1. And to me, that would be criminal negligence of stupidity if Trubisky was the clear-out starter in week 1 and it was because Foles was hurt or had something wrong, like Trubisky just beat him out. That's crap. Like, because you could say right now, after this year, they have no financial commitments to Trubisky. They have a couple of years of financial commitments to Nick Foles. So it makes more sense to start Foles. You went after him for a reason. He should be, but I'm a little bit skeptical about that, honestly. And can you give a 2-minute preseason scouting report on Clyde Edwards-Helaire? He was my number 1 running back in this draft class. I'm a huge fan of his. I love the agility that he possesses. I love the power that he runs with. I love his ability as a pass catcher. Like, I look at him, I see 3 down back, and I think he's going to do great things in that Kansas City offense, especially now I believe Damian Williams has opted out. Like, there's a huge opportunity there for Helaire to have a really big rookie season. Hey, way to go, league. Let the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs give him an even better option at the running back position. I'm sure that'll work out well for everybody. Yeah, big fan of Helaire. I had like a late-ish first-round grade on him. I think he'll do quite well there. Nasaman21 asks, would you start Tyrod Taylor or Justin Herbert? There's always the notion of, well, you took the kid that high, so you might as well play him. I don't always fundamentally disagree with that. If you bring a young guy into a situation where you have a clearly established veteran that is clearly at least one step better than the rookie, then you play the veteran because he gives you the best chance to win. But I don't know that that's necessarily the case with Tyra. I'm not trying to be dismissive of Tyra. I'm just trying to be realistic here. Like, you got to look at it and you got to say, okay, if you go through the process and you actually have a true competition, which you should have a true competition, it should just not be you're handing the starting reins to Tyrod Taylor. Let them battle it out. See what comes out of it, and may the best man win, but give both of them a legit opportunity to win the starting job. If you get to a certain point and you determine that, hey, Tyrod is clearly a step ahead right now, of Herbert, then you start Tyrod. If they are even, or if it's really, really close, then you start the kid. I disagree with the notion that the best way for these guys to learn is to sit and watch. That's dumb. At some point in time, they got to play. Now you could say, well, they did that with Mahomes in Kansas City. Yeah, that's kind of fool's gold type of thing. Because at the time, you had a clearly established veteran in Alex Smith, while long term, I knew Mahomes would be much better than Alex Smith. At that moment, it made sense for them to play Alex Smith. They had the luxury to be able to sit Mahomes for a year. So that worked. But, you look at the Houston Texans eventually when they realize, oh, Deshaun Watson's really good. Let's play Deshaun Watson. Like, you think the Texans are worse off because he played pretty much right away? Are the Seahawks worse off because Russell Wilson played, right away? Like, I don't know that there's any one tried and true formula here, but I hate that kind of old school mentality of, well, you draft a quarterback, it takes 2 or 3 years for them to learn. No, hell with that. If they're close to being ready, then you play them. No better way to learn than trial by fire. At Keys 10, is Joe Burrow overrated? I think it depends on how you define overrated. If you think that as a number 1 pick, he's got Hall of Fame potential, perhaps. If you think as a number 1 overall pick that he's going to be a potential 10 to 12 year starter for that franchise and at least be like franchise type of level, I don't necessarily think that he's overly rated. Like, I love his awareness. I love his instincts. I love his feel for the game. His accuracy is outstanding. I look at him, though. The pocket presence at times, to me, is shaky. Like, for a dude that has some decent size, he goes down awful easy. And that is something that really concerns me at the NFL level, as well as the arm strength or the lack of arm strength. I've seen some people tell me, like, oh, his arm is better than you think. No, he's got kind of a noodle arm. Like, I look at him, he's more like an Alex Smith or a Dak Prescott type. Then, like if he was another level up, maybe a Tony Romo type. Like, I think he's good. The fact that he only had 1 great year and he had all that tremendous talent around him. Like, he got away at LSU with a lot of questionable throws because of the talent around him. But I think the situation is solid for him right away. I think he's got some good infrastructure around him on the offensive side of the ball. So I think there's a chance that he can come out of the gates and he can play relatively well as a rookie quarterback. So I think if you're expecting him to be fitted for a jacket in Canton someday, could he be overrated? Yes. If you're thinking that he could be a long-term starter in the league, no, I don't think he's overrated. I certainly think he could be that. Callum Burns is 14. How good were you at playing sports in school, like baseball, basketball, etc.? Well, as in school, I was a cross-country and track guy. Track was admittedly the better sport for me. I was all conference in relays as a junior. Not as a senior, but as a junior. In terms of track, like my 400 time was 52-ish. My mile time was high 430s, like 439. A long time ago, admittedly, and you probably look at me and you laugh, but it's 20 plus years ago. You got to life's beat me down a lot, and I beat myself down a lot. But back in my day, I was a pretty good athlete, pretty good golfer. Like, I could shoot. If anybody used to watch the old Off the Rope Show channel we did years back, and remember the man Teflon and how I schooled B-Rad. You look at me and you might think one thing. Yeah, I can play a little bit. I had some athletic talent. I still have some athletic talent. Thank you very much. Mags, the NFL herd asked, now that Steve Sabol got elected to the Hall of Fame, who is your number 1 snub from the Pro Football Hall of Fame? Number 1 snub, I don't know if I truly have a number 1 snub at this moment without sitting down and actually thinking about it. One guy I'd probably pound the table a lot for would be Sterling Sharp. It feels funny as a Bears fan to say that about a Packer. But, in his time, he was the second best receiver in the game after Jerry Rice. And while there was a little bit of differentiation there, it wasn't as much differentiation during this extended period of time as some people might lead you to believe. Sterling Sharp was a stud, and I think it's been a crime that he's not already in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I mean, 1911 asked, who do you think is going to win the NBA Finals? I think it should be the Clippers this year because if there's ever a more irrelevant organization winning perhaps a more irrelevant NBA championship, I don't know that we'd ever have one. It would sure feel like the perfect combination to be. In terms of who's going to win it, I don't know at this point. Georgian Fulia asked, last season Tannehill took over for Mariota in Tennessee. Do you think it will happen with Mariota in Las Vegas this season? Well, Gruden was a huge backer and advocate of Mariota in that 2015 draft. If he's not totally committed and sold on Derek Carr, I certainly think it could happen, yes. It certainly could. Thank you, everybody, for asking these questions. Do another one another week or so. Stay tuned soon for the other one. Thank you.